Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, join me once again as we continue to make our way through the Basically series. For those that don't know, this is a series of decks that I put together that will not require you to use a single rare or mythic to build. That's right, so without further ado, join me today in the Brawl format as we continue to make our way through the multicolored Basically decks, with today's deck being called, Basically, Arabella. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So basically, Arabella is going to be Boros colors of white and red. We're looking at an average mana curve of about 2.2, and we'll be rocking a total of 18 creatures in the deck. We'll have 19 instants, 15 sorceries, 4 artifacts, 10 enchantments, and 35 lands. Basically, Arabella is going to be a go-wide token strategy, where we want to try to flood the board as much as possible and as fast as possible. Once we have a critical mass of those tokens out, Arabella should be able to do her thing and sometimes close out the game all on her own. But in order to understand this, let's talk about our commander for just a moment. Arabella Abandoned Doll is a 2-mana, 1/3 legendary artifact creature toy, and it reads, whenever Arabella attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. Please keep in mind that as it says right there, we want to make sure we have weak tokens on the battlefield. We don't want to pump them up, or else Arabella will not get the maximum value out of her strategy. Having said that, of course, if Arabella fails to pull off the strategy, we do have a backup plan where we actually can pump up our tokens if that is going to be the more favorable way to get to our victory. Now that you have a general idea of what's going on, let's now talk about the cards in this deck in depth. So, starting actually with the cards that are going to enable Arabella to ensure she can push through her damage and activate her ability no matter what, we'll go with Underfoot Underdogs here, Goblin Smuggler, Pathmaker Initiate, and Zephyr Boots. Specifically with the equipment here, once we attach this, Arabella will have flying. Anytime we deal combat damage to a player, draw a card and discard a card. Great for, again, evasion. But to ensure that we can guarantee it no matter what, that's why we have these creatures. Pathmaker Initiate here, and Goblin Smuggler do the exact same thing. They're both 2 and 3 mana cards, but we tap them to make sure a creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked for a turn, making sure that Arabella can get through no matter what. We also have another one here that's a bit of a hybrid bonus for us. So for 3 mana, Underfoot Underdogs will allow us to make 1 Goblin creature token, and we can tap it down. Granted, you have to pay also 1 extra for it, but it still works the exact same way as the other 2 cards. The next category we're going to talk about, of course, will be all of the token producers in our deck, starting with Crawling Corpse here. When the creature dies, leave behind a Phyrexian Might, which we can, of course, use for other value because it's going to be an artifact creature. I'll talk about this more in just a moment. We'll have Usher the Fallen also in the 1-drop slot. We can use the Boast ability to start creating white human warrior creature tokens. Gleeful Demolition and Kudotha's Rebirth, as I just mentioned earlier, we want to make sure we can make tokens. However, these ones will require us to sacrifice an artifact or destroy an artifact to make 3 Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens. To do so, for example, that's why Crawling Chorus can also be a beneficial thing when it dies. To make code tokens just on our own whenever we need to, Satyr's Cunning is going to be great here. For 1 mana, make a Satyr creature token. Granted, it can't block, but we don't care because we want to be aggressive with the deck. You can also escape it from the graveyard by exiling 2 other cards and paying an extra 3 mana. Clarion Spirit here will make us spirit tokens anytime we cast a second spell each turn. Raise the Alarm here, and Resolute Reinforcements with Dragon Fodder here, Forbidden Friendship, and Goblin Instigator, Krenko's Command. You kind of get the idea. All these cards are going to do the same thing. For 2 mana, each of them will, of course, add 2 bodies to the battlefield. With Resolute Reinforcements, it's technically a flash creature, but all the other ones are going to be sorcery spells. We'll have Shock Brigade here. This one, of course, will make a warrior creature token with the Mobilize ability. In other words, you have to attack, and that's how we make the warrior. Granted, of course, the warrior will die, of course, at the end of our turn. So be aware of that if we just want to make sure we can get some extra value. The other remaining 2 drops in the deck that are creatures are going to help us just enable tokens, of course, as long as we trigger off their abilities. With Young Pyromancer here, anytime we can cast an instant or sorcery, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. With Baird here, he'll create for his soldier creature tokens as long as, of course, we have at the beginning of our end step a creature with power greater than its base power. With Sky Knight Vanguard here, anytime we're attacking, we can create soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. And the remainder of our token creators are going to be Charge the Mites here. You can either use this to make some Phyrexian Mites, or you can use this at spot removal in a pinch. We have Dalkavan Pack Beast here. While the creature itself is an Ox that can't really do any damage, it can mobilize for 3, which actually does put a lot of bodies onto the battlefield, if only a bit temporary. Hop to it here. Good rate for 3 mana, create 3 1/1 White Rabbit creature tokens. Horde Outburst here is the exact same thing, but it's going to be in red, and they'll create goblins instead. And finally, we'll have Release the Dogs. For 4 mana, create 4 1/1 White Dog creature tokens. Our next category will be Pump, Protection, and Payoffs. So, starting at the top once again, when the 1-drop will have God's Willing here. Protects any one of our creatures by giving it protection from the color of our choice until end of turn and scry 1. Requisition Raid here, you can use this however you want to destroy artifacts, enchantments, or put +1/+1 counters on each creature target player controls. For more protection, we have Restoration Magic, and this is great because you can scale this up, either protecting a single creature, or in the late game, if you have a lot of mana out, you can use this to protect your entire board from any kinds of removal, giving all of your creatures or all of your permanents hexproof and indestructible, and you also will gain some life at scales. One of our payoffs here is going to be Goblin Bushwhackers. If we kick this card, it will give all of our creatures haste and an extra +1/+0 pump until end of turn. For pump and payoff here, we'll have Case of the Gateway Express. When this case enters, we can pick a creature and then we can deal 1 damage to that creature for each creature we control. Solve the case by having 3 or more creatures attack, and then that means all of our creatures will get a permanent pump of +1/+0. For extra pump to our tokens, we'll also have Intangible Virtue here. For more protection, we have Sedgery's Shelter, or it could be a land in a pinch. Sheltered by Ghost here, again, one of our best spot removal here. This aura can be attached to a creature and then exile a non-land permanent until Sheltered by Ghost leaves the battlefield. The creature itself will have a Ward 2 protection, lifelink, and an extra +1/+0 pump. Cavalcade Calamity here, another great way to, of course, use the payoff of being super aggressive. Anytime we attack with creatures of power 1 or less, this will allow us to deal 1 point of damage to a player or planeswalker for that creature that's attacking. For our creatures, when they just simply enter the battlefield, we have Impact Tremors again. They'll, of course, ping our opponent for 1 point of damage each. Borrow's Charm here is a bit of a multi-use card here, so we can either use this to do 4 damage to a creative player or planeswalker, give all of our permanents protection by using Indestructible until end of turn, or target creature can gain Double Strike. Even though most of our game plan is going to be a lot of weak creatures, don't underestimate the Double Strike if we can pump up one singular creature. And one way we can do that, of course, will be with Frontline Rush. You can either use this to make some Goblin tokens, but realistically, you want to try to use this as a sneaky way to do massive damage out of nowhere. Target creature can also get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures we control. Swiftfoot Boots here for protection reasons, giving it hexproof and haste for any one of our creatures. Goblin Surprise here. Ideally, you want to use this for tokens, or you can use this as pump by giving all of our creatures +2/+0 on end of turn. Gut True Soul Zealot here is actually a unique option for us. So again, in scenarios where maybe we want more power with our tokens, we can actually sacrifice our tokens and upgrade them to make them 4/1 Menace Skeletons, which can actually be a lot more stronger of an option as long as we have any creature attack. Imodane's Recruiter here can also make White Knight creature tokens, but realistically, you just want this to ETB. When it does, give all creatures we control +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. Raid Bombardment here gives us a little bit more flexibility than, say, Cavalcade of Calamity. While the Cavalcade here can only do damage if we attack with a creature of power 1 or less, Raid Bombardment is a little bit more forgiving because we can use a creature with power 2 or less to attack to achieve the same result. Reckless Bushwhacker here, similar of course to one of our other creatures, Goblin Bushwhacker here. If we pay the surge cost, all creatures we control will get +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. You see a pair of goblins here is similar to our other options here that we've shown you, where we can of course use this to either give our creatures pump, or you can use this to create more goblin creature tokens. And finally, we'll have Heroic Reinforcements, giving us 2 white soldier creature tokens, and it'll give all of our creatures a pump of +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. Our next category is going to be the general catch-all utility options that you have for pretty much any deck out there. So we'll have Fragmentize here to destroy an artifact or enchantment with a mana value of 4 or less. Source of Plowshare is going to be good spot removal at instant speed for 1 mana. Lightning Axe here, we have to discard a card or pay 5 to deal 5 damage to a creature. Sticky Fingers, once we attach this to any one of our creatures, gives it menace, and anytime we deal combat damage, we get to create a treasure token. Even if the creature and the enchantment goes away, we can simply draw another card. Strike It Rich here, we are of course going to try to ramp with extra tokens with treasures here to help us keep our game plan going. Voldrin Epic here doesn't really do much, but we can use of course the blood token as an extra way of just filtering through our deck. Wear and Tear here, you can either use this to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or both at the same time. Kabira Takedown here can deal, of course, spot removal to any creature equal to the number of creatures we have to a creature or planeswalker, or it can be a land. Ossification here and Reprobation are going to be mostly ways to lock out certain creatures. With Reprobation, sometimes you want moments where you don't want to exile or trigger off anything a creature has, so just make it lose abilities and make it a 0/1. With Ossification, we can then exile not only a creature, we can also exile a planeswalker until either of these auras leave the battlefield. Thraben Charm here does a little bit of extra for us. Of course, we can do some damage equal to the number of creatures we control, we can destroy an enchantment, or use this as Graveyard Hate. Bitter Reunion here, when it enters, we get to discard a card and simply draw 2 cards. Sacrifice the enchantment at any time, and then we can give all of our creatures haste until end of turn. Cathartic Pyre here, you can either use this as card draw or you can use this as spot removal, whatever you need. Legion Leadership here can either be a tapped dual land or target creature will gain double its power and first strike until end of turn. Arcane Signet, because we are a multicolored deck, this is going to be one of our ramp options as a mana rock. Dewdrop Carry here, you can gift the card if you want to, so you can either choose up to 2 target creatures with a mana value of 2 or less and put them back onto the battlefield, or if you gift a card to your opponent, you can get 3 creatures instead. Stroke of Midnight here, one of our most powerful options here. This, of course, this will destroy non-land permanent. Granted, we have to give our opponent a human creature token, but that's a small price to pay to pretty much take care of anything on the battlefield. Flick a Coin here, card draw, pinging ability, and of course, ramp for us. And then finally, on the top end will be Fast/Furious. Either pay 3 mana to discard a card and draw 2 cards, or for 5 mana, deal 3 damage to each creature without flying. And then finally is going to be the mana base, but of course we are an ultra budget deck, so we're going to be working with a lot of tapped duels. We'll of course have in the deck our basics of 13 plains and 13 mountains. For our tapped duels, it'll be Upbraided Bluffs, Lorehold Campus, Rustvale Bridge, and Windscar Crag. For our fetch lands, we'll be utilizing Cabaret Courtyard here. We'll have Terramorphic Expanse. We'll be utilizing Demolition Field for non-basic land hate. Command Terror will be a staple for any one of our Brawl/Commander decks. And Pit of Offerings can be sometimes good in certain moments here where we want to exile some cards and hopefully fix for the right mana. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Okay, now that we got the deck tech portion out of the way, let's now cover tips and strategy I can give you to get the value you want out of your deck. So, in the early part of the game, just build out your tokens and go as wide as you can as fast as possible. Whatever your opponent is trying to do, just keep pushing away the damage while you can to keep softening up your opponent, making Arabella's job a lot easier when she enters the battlefield. There are going to be, of course, different ways you're going to branch off on your strategy depending on what your opponent is throwing out there. If you know that you can get some early game damage in with cards such as your Impact Tremors, your Raid Bombardment, or your Cavalcade of Calamity, keep picking away and hopefully your opponent will have no choice but to just keep answering each one of your creatures. Save your spot removal for the mid and late game for certain creatures that you're going to have a hard time dealing with, or sometimes artifact and enchantments that you might have trouble with if it impedes on our strategy. Once the coast is clear, Arabella should be able to come out, and thankfully she's pretty cheap to get out. So once you have that and you have the protection for Arabella, start swinging away. By this point, you should either be able to close out the game with a big swing from Arabella and her ability, or as she does that, she can soften up your opponent, so that way hopefully the rest of your tokens that are also swinging at the same time can finish off your opponent and score you the victory. This will lead us to one of the 3 major advantages our deck has. The first major advantage our deck has is we're very resistant to spot removal, and I do want to emphasize that means resistant, not immune. So allow me to explain. As you saw from the deck tech, we have a lot of different ways of building out a bunch of tokens very quickly and flooding the board. However, there will be sometimes a couple moments where we do want to keep certain creatures out long enough to help us build a steady stream of tokens. So cards such as Baird or Young Pyromancer or Sky Knight Vanguard, while they can keep producing for us tokens at a nice little easy rate, those are most likely going to be the cards that your opponent will save spot removal for once they figure out what our strategy is. But having said that, we of course can keep applying pressure with utilizing our instant and sorceries, and that mostly should overwhelm our opponent before they have a real answer to us. The second major advantage our deck has is we're extremely versatile depending on what our opponent throws at us. Although Arabella herself is the way we want to get to our victory, there's going to be moments where we're going to have to pivot and then utilize our tokens as the alternate option to get to our victory. But this is the reason why I threw into the deck Raid Bombardment, Cavalcade of Calamity, and Impact Tremors to slowly soften up your opponent, and hopefully once we can get the extra pump with one of our spells, or a case of the Gateway Express, Goblin Bushwhacker, you kind of get the idea. These cards will pump up and apply pressure very quickly against our opponent, and they'll sometimes be overwhelmed because they most likely were not expecting the pump out of nowhere for our victory. And the final major advantage our deck has is we're also pretty resistant to wraths. Although I will mention this in the weakness portion, the way I want to phrase this is even if your opponent tries to blow away your strategy, you have many spells in the deck that can keep rebuilding up your tokens and hopefully redeploy. Thankfully also Arabella is only a 2 mana creature in the command zone, so that should mean it's easy for you to redeploy her if you can of course just make the time to rebuild everything up. You have other ways of course speeding up the clock, as I mentioned earlier, not just going wide, but a couple of key spells in the deck can help us pump up our Arabella or any one of our creatures to get a surprise one-hit swing against our opponent with sometimes a pumped up token that they probably were not expecting to hit their face. But of course, to be fair, as always, I like to mention in all of these basically deck techs the weaknesses of the deck you may encounter if you're still interested in playing this deck. And the first major weakness to the deck is going to be this deck is very poor at ramping. Now, of course, that's not the fault of the deck itself, but more along the lines of the colors. So, being the color identity of Boros, i.e. red and white, means that you're not going to have that many options except for, most likely in this deck, treasure tokens. The treasures can be helpful, but if you can't get to those treasures early on, your deck is going to have to hopefully play everything on curve, and we're going to have to cross our fingers in the hopes that our opponent doesn't set us back a turn. This will now lead us to the second major disadvantage to the deck, and that is going to be we have a hard time dealing with enemies that also are going wide. Granted, you have only one major wrath in the deck, which is Fast and Furious, and the only other way you realistically can try to block your opponent is going to be utilizing some of your creature spells as pump spells. So the cards that we mentioned earlier, cards such as You See a Pair of Goblins, you can use that defensively to pump up your creatures, but then you're going to lose your board if you have to block a lot of creatures your opponent has. And sometimes they may have the toughness that's high enough that even with the pump, it won't be enough to stop their attack against you. And the final major disadvantage our deck has is our commander really relies on a wide board state to do its thing. Arabella is incapable of making any tokens on her own, so she has to rely completely on the rest of our strategy to actually go off. If that doesn't happen, Arabella is kind of a sad little toy that just cannot get anything done. Yes, the deck does have a couple of ways of not only protecting her, but also your entire board, but you only have a couple of options. We cannot shove in too many protection spells because then we will lose the balance of going wide, which is mostly the intent of this deck in the first place. Now, if you still like today's deck and you're interested in seeing what else you can do with Boros or tokens general, as always, I will leave on screen right now a couple of quick snapshots of previous decks we have done utilizing this type of strategy. If you haven't already noticed, those links have been scattered throughout the course of this video, so if you want to show me a little bit of love, please click on any one of those and check out any of the other deck sets we have done utilizing this strategy. And with that all out of the way, here are my final thoughts that I want to give you on this deck. If you're a fan of the small but mighty, if you're a fan of token-based strategies, and if you're a fan of a commander that doesn't necessarily get super strong but can do some massive swings out of nowhere, then I would definitely say, give this deck a try, and I assure you, whether you manage to do that massive life gain and drain swing with Arabella, or going super wide with a bunch of tokens, you're going to have a lot of fun doing so, and you'll be very surprised at how you can pull it off on today's budget, and I assure you, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later!